A common sense recap of the day's biggest stories. It's John Catsimatidis and Rita Cosby. Katz and Cosby on 77 WABC.
And we are back here on Katz and Cosby. Well, we were just talking about Alvin Bragg and the crime in New York and these horrible random crimes. But Alvin Bragg is focused on Donald Trump, and Donald Trump's lawyers just did a filing a little bit ago. And joining us now is the former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District in New York, Andy McCarthy. Andy, can you kind of explain this filing? And can you believe that Alvin Bragg, as we're just talking about these horrible things that are happening in New York City, he's saying he wants to keep this case kind of hanging over potentially until 2029, till Trump leaves the White House? I mean, you can't make this up, Andy.
Well, yeah, and I think the interesting thing, Rita, is he has kind of manipulated Trump into being the one who's pushing for the delay. And that may seem odd to people, but it's a quirk of the way the criminal law works. The only way, the way that President Trump could be completely vindicated in this case would be to get it to appeal, because there were numerous errors in the proceedings, and any number of them could be reversible and get rid of the case. The problem is, in the criminal law, you have to be sentenced and have the judgment of conviction filed before the whole case goes up on appeal. Right now, even though the Democrats' rhetoric would lead you to believe otherwise, President Trump is not a convicted felon. He won't be one unless and until Judge Merchan denies his post-trial motions, imposes sentence, and then enters the judgment of conviction on the record. And I think President Trump, of course, would like the whole case to go away, but he would rather go into the White House not facing a sentence, not having a sentence imposed, and not having a criminal record, versus going through all of that just so he can get to appeal. So I think Bragg knows that, and he knows that if Trump is put to that choice, he would rather delay the case for 4 years and not be sentenced and have that judgment entered, rather than otherwise.
So what happens, by the way, now, the sentencing, which was supposed to be next week, right? That obviously is put off indefinitely, right? Or we have to wait to hear from the judge, right? Because we still haven't heard what the judge is saying.
Yeah, well, that goes to the thing you initially asked me about, which is this new motion to dismiss that Trump filed today. Now, I think legally I'm not very persuaded by it, because his argument basically is that his election as president means, as a matter of law, the case should be dismissed. And that would put the president above the law. There's a lot of cases that say that that's not so. But the thing is, practically speaking, what's interesting about it is Trump filed the motion, and, the letter he filed today is a request for permission to file the motion. He'd like to file the motion December 20th, which means Bragg wouldn't even respond until after the holidays. And by the time Merchan could even think about deciding it, President Trump would be back in office, at which point, under the Supremacy Clause, the state officials can't take any action that would impede the federal government's legitimate operations. So I think at that point, the case would have to be frozen for 4 years anyway.
Yeah, it's wild to see it. I mean, just the politics of the fact that, that Bragg is still pushing. Judge Weinberg.
Andy, your column was absolutely terrific in National Review on this, and I read it with great interest. It seems to me you pointed out the right thing. Merchan could set aside the verdicts on the counts,
right,
and say it was tainted because they put in improper evidence, which tainted the jury, and it was used in a summation. He doesn't have to dismiss the indictment. All he has to do is set aside the verdicts, Andy.
Yeah, the only thing about that, Judge, is after a couple of years of close observation of this guy, Judge Merchan is the one who let that evidence in.
Exactly.
Even though everybody knew the Supreme Court was considering this issue, which I think was it was reckless of Bragg to offer it. It was reckless of Merchan to let it in. But in 2 years of watching the judge closely, I haven't seen one time when he admitted he made a mistake.
This is a law review article or a law school exam about the multitude of errors that this judge made.
We're sitting here
Do you remember when he let that the testimony in from Stormy Daniels?
Right.
And it turned out to be salacious and awful. What did he do after he let it in?
He had a limiting instruction.
Realized that he shouldn't have. He started to blame the prosecutors for doing what he told them they could do.
Right, and then he also told the jury to unhear it, which you can't unhear it after you heard it.
Right.
Guys, we're all sitting here discussing legal maneuvers, and Bragg in his office has to use his staff to do this. Curtis just told us this criminal, the guy that murdered 3 people the other day, was arrested 7 times this year.
8 times.
And not incarcerated.
Yes.
Yet they're wasting all this time and energy to try to put Trump in jail. I mean, it's ridiculous.
It is, and taxpayer money.
But wait a minute. Do you know whether he falsified his business record?
Exactly. There you go. He didn't commit mortgage crimes.
Right. Right. I mean, it is absolutely incredible, Andy, too. I mean, what a dangerous precedent this has set, this opening of the door. Now, the other case that's also sitting out there is the Mar-a-Lago was worth $18 million case. That one's still sitting out there, too, right?
Yeah, but, they had oral argument in that, Rita, before the appellate division, and it did not go well for Tish James. So there's a chance. I think I think it's highly, highly likely that at the very least the penalty gets slashed significantly.
Right.
But the court seemed disturbed enough by the way that Tish James used that statute, which really didn't apply to the situation. It's a consumer protection statute that she tried to apply to a situation where you have sophisticated financial.
The loans are paid back with interest.
And
no harm, no foul. Thank you.
This sends out a message to all business people that you do business in the state of New York at your own risk.
Absolutely right. And I think Trump is right to say that you'd be crazy to operate a business in New York if that's the environment.
Why everyone's leaving.
Yeah, sad. Really,
I mean, the projection is by 2050, 2 million people will leave New York. Well, if they're making for us impossible to stay, what do you expect?
Right. And with crime, with all the other, and look at the focus, like we just said, the focus is so askew. There are so many horrible things going out there, and Bragg just seems focused on Trump.
You're right.
Andrew McCarthy, thank you so much.
And no one will run against him.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Andy. God bless you.
Thank you, Andy.